Okay. In the world of psychological first aid, kasi you don't have to be naman a psychologist to do this. No, anyone can do this, and I think this is very important at this point. There are three main pillars. You have to look, listen, and link. Para rin yan stoplight. Stop, look, and listen. In the terms of look, assess nyo muna yung situation. Ilan yung affected, ano yung risk ng needs of the affected, and of course, you expect emotional reactions. Next slide, please. Listen. I think the most important part of psychological first aid is the art of listening. I have a favorite saying, no? Sabi nga nila, you listen not to react, but you listen to understand. Then that's how PFA works. Most of the time, you listen to what the other has to say because venting is one form of therapy also. And then, next slide please, it's important that you link. Now, when you say link, you have to give give them access to information where they can seek help, where they can talk about more deeper problems. Right now, madaming hotlines na pwede natin tawagan. One of that is the NCMH Crisis Hotline, yung 0917 USAP. You can call the hotline and ask for help. Next slide. This is important too, no? Ang dami kasi nating mga group chats, there's so many noise. So, regulate rin yung social media exposure. So, if there is such thing as social distancing, there's also such thing as social media distancing. You only have to choose what you listen to. One technique is, kunyari, dalawa lang yung source of information mo. DOH and World Health Organization. Yun lang. In that way, wala masyadong information overload. Next slide, please. And of course, you have to be alert also. Yeah, I think this is a time where we have to practice the real essence of bayanihan, which is really be there for each other. Kasi, please remember, we are all experiencing the same isolation. And I think we have to be alert most of the time for those at risk for isolation and loneliness. Next slide, please. A buddy system can work. Hindi naman kailangan na magkasama rin sa house. You can set a time where you will call each other and check on each other, monitor each other's workload, and communicate what you need. No need is too simple or masyadong it's too small. Basta pag may kailangan ka, may tatakbuhan ka. Next slide, please. Acknowledge and appreciate what others are also doing to help. No, sometimes ang dami nating volunteer organizations that are doing a lot. So you might also want to volunteer if you are ready and you feel that you have the time to do it too, because not all people also are equipped to volunteer. So find your balance there. Next slide, please. So you also have to reorient people on conflict resolution skills. So nagkakaroon ng clarifying information and proper communication techniques may decrease risk for misunderstanding. Next slide. And share spaces, maintain social activities even online. So madami siyang, again, ang pinaka magre-recur na term dito sa talk na to is the new normal, which requires us to adapt and not to let go totally of our social lives completely. Next slide. Maintain social connection. So phone call, a text message, that's already a big deal. Next slide. Connect with people in person. So ito naman is already siguro after the lockdown, no, when social distancing, pero again, we have to maintain that, no, 1 meter away, but still, it's important to connect. That's the bottom line. Next slide. and also address psychosocial stressors. So you may want to start a campaign in terms of supporting the mental health of others. Um, and may mga little things na rin tayong ginagawa, like some are volunteering their services in terms of paying your bills, etc. Little things. Little things matter. But of course, you have to choose who you make utos kasi madaming nanloloko na rin ngayon. So again, let's be careful while doing this. And of course, this is what I was mentioning earlier. Seek professional help. These are some of the hotlines that are available in your screen. Take note of those numbers because they are actually very, very helpful, most especially in these trying times. Next slide. So in the acts of support, you receive and you provide. So cycle lang siya. So hindi pwedeng give and give. Sometimes you need to take also. So it's a give and take model that we are trying to adapt. Next slide. Remember, social distancing doesn't mean social isolation. So hindi ibig sabihin that 1 meter apart, pati yung feelings nyo 1 meter apart. And it doesn't mean also that social distancing is encouraging isolation from others. You still have to keep that sense of connection, most especially nowadays. Next slide. Again, just a reassurance that we just all have to be patient because things will get better soon. When? I wouldn't really know. I hope nga that we have the answers. But I think that but of course, just like in any trauma in life, eventually, we will all get better soon. Next slide. So that ends my talk.
Thank you. Rad, can we go through the questions? Doc Gia, we'll just go through the questions. Some of them you've already addressed in your talk.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. But maybe, Rad, you can share your screen and we can go to the Q&A slide that I actually, those questions have been sent na naman din in advance. Ayan. Can you probably give us yung mga specific ways on how we can address anxiety? Because I think this is one of the popular words right now, aside from new normal and uncertainty. A lot of people are just going through like the everyday anxiety. What can we do when we are in that moment?
Well, in terms of anxiety kasi, may mga tinatawag tayo that things that we can control and there are things that we can't control. I think the extension of like personally, the extension of the enhanced community quarantine is something that's beyond our control. Mm-hmm. So if it's beyond our control, we have, I forgot the other option, but we have an emotional option. And we also have that option of trying to address it in terms of perspective. Action-oriented approach also. So you may want to talk to someone or do something that is that can fit you. No? Best practices and tips in counseling. For me, you just have to listen. There are no words to really say, but kasi lahat naman tayo, we feel the same way, no? We're all anxious. So the best practice, again, for PFA, you have to listen. What are the reminders or tips to be given to HIV clients so that they will not develop depression? You have to constantly talk. Again, yung body system will work here, no? And number one, don't forget to take your meds. Identify a body that you can talk to whenever you feel that anxiety hits you. That for me is very helpful. Psychosocial strategies we can adapt. Again, you may want to make a routine in a day na you follow. Like every 9 a.m. breakfast, tapos 11 exercise, 1 p.m. you can talk to someone. Yung parang ganon, meron kayong fina-follow na certain pattern that you can at least connect also with your loved ones without being so physically together. Okay? So, pwede rin sabi ni RJ, pwede rin yung TikTok. Ayan. Pwede rin yun. Kasi nakaka-happy siya.
Someone's actually asking about TikTok because some people are doing it too much. Is this healthy ba daw?
Well, the TikTok I see kasi, yes, I have seen too much yung mga TikToks na medyo nasa excessive side. So, I think we'll just stick to the yung healthy ones, no? And TikToks, like sabi nga ni RJ, TikToks like any other social media platform can also be a form of expression. Sometimes pwede rin gano'n. But again, wala pa rin studies dito. But just a warning that may mga nakikita na rin akong TikToks that are not really helpful. Okay, so...
I think we still have 2 other slides, Rad, with Q&A. Maybe we can just go through them. Ito, yung about sleep. You mentioned earlier having a routine. Do you have any suggestions on sleep and exercise? And actually, someone also asked about internal uneasiness and tumult. How can we shake out this feeling? And then, kasi hindi nakakalabas.
Well, personally, I can share what my family does. No, we have a regular exercise routine. No? So we live in a condominium na wala po kaming garden. So, but you make it a point at 4 p.m. we start to move. We just run around the place. So parang we make do with what's there, because physical activity is very important now. Because I don't encourage being stagnant. It will add up lang kasi to the anxiety. So don't forget physical activity. Don't forget also to eat properly. And of course, sleep is very important. What helps sleep, actually, milk can help sleep. Milk still helps, no? And ano pa ba? So yun, that's my own personal advice for those who are at home.
Okay, yun lang muna, Doc G. I hope you and Doc RJ can stay para we can gather more questions mamaya pagkatapos ng talk ni Prof. Beng.
Okay.
Hi, Prof. Beng. Welcome. Salamat po for supporting our...
Beng.
So si Professor Beng, one of the things she does is she teaches communication in public health among several health promotion courses. So she's the chair and she's the chair and professor at the Department of Health Promotion and Education at the UP College of Public Health. So please help me welcome Prof. Beng.
So, good afternoon once more, and thank you for this opportunity to share. I'd like to talk about some general things about risk communication, and then specific things that we would like to recommend on each stage of the crisis that we are in right now. And I believe that as healthcare professionals, we also have a role in health communication. So this is something I think that would be close to our hearts, because we also would like to take care of our patients. So just a very basic definition here. It talks about discussion about an adverse outcome occurring and the probability of that occurring. Now, well, risk communication started with the environmental health arena, and it has been picked up in health as well. And that risk communication now talks about reasoned and mature communication. Now, strictly speaking, anything to do with identifying what are the possible risks of people, and also giving them some pointers on how best to be able to respond to this would be part of risk communication. In our case right now, amid the COVID-19 situation, this crisis and emergency risk communication talks about urgency of this kind of communication and the need to communicate this to our public. So it may not necessarily be just for our patients alone, but for other stakeholders and for people in our support network too. And This involves experts who provide the following information so that people can make the best decisions about their well-being, because that's what we want our um, audiences is to move them also towards the response towards positive health behaviors. It's difficult right now, but that's what we're hoping for too. Now, I'd like
Beng, sorry to
yes.
interrupt you. Can you put your screen, yung ano naka-wide screen siya? Yung sa
Widescreen.
PowerPoint. Oo.
Sandali.
Yan. Para, yan.
Ah,
Perfect. Thank you
okay.
very much.
Thank you. Hindi ko napansin. Okay. Um, some of you might be familiar with this. This is Peter Sandman's formula about risk, and we make use of this for risk communication. According to Peter Sandman, and together with his wife too, uh, risk is equal to hazard plus outrage. Now, the hazard, of course, would be the technical information that we often give. This is like telling us how many positive cases do we have right now? How many number of people in monitoring, persons under investigation, persons under monitoring, how many have actually recovered? So that's part of describing the hazard and also the risks of actually getting it. But what we also would like to include in risk communication is to address outrage. And this outrage is not necessarily about anger, about heightened emotion, but it could also be about fear. It could also be about shame or loss of faith. And so when we consider communicating risks to people, let's consider that we communicate both technical information and also addressing the outrage that they currently feel. Um, Now, many of the outrage factors have, I think, been discussed by Dr. Gia in her earlier speech, and that's why it gives us an idea of where people are right now. And for each stage of this emergency and disaster, there is a different informational need of the audiences. Thus, for each type of or each stage of the disaster, we would need to offer a different set of objectives. For example, basic information would only be up to a certain point because succeeding stages would call for different actions as well. Okay. Now, I would just like to focus on initial maintenance phases. Those are where we are in right now. I will not talk about the pre-crisis nor of the recovery part, but right now we are in the situation where we having either a few cases, especially from the provinces, and this would be outside Metro Manila, and also during the time that here we are already having many cases. So depending on where you are in right now, if you are in the initial phase, uh, this is uh, this is usually what is taking place. There's confusion and intense media interest because media would like to get more information about things. We may not have complete information at the moment as the epidemiology unit of the department in the regions are still collecting the data and verifying them. And some channels of communication may be disrupted because of the initial phase, especially when we have been surprised about the event. Now, in this initial event, the communication is directed to the general public and the affected groups. So we identify who are these affected groups. These are not just those with COVID positive confirmed cases, but we're also looking at people who are having some symptoms, those who would have exposure, but they would not tell you that they have an exposure. And there are people who are immunocompromised, as the case of the patients that you are currently handling. So this communication is directed to them to reduce certain uncertainty and to increase self-efficacy and reassurance. And by self-efficacy, we mean that they have the belief that they are able to do the recommended actions that you are asking them to do. And so some strategies would be, well, in some cases, you need to establish spokespersons, especially if you're working in an organization and you would need to give out regular updates to, and to talk about emergency courses of action. So these would be happening during the initial event in the response phase. Now, here is our role as communicators here. One is to learn the facts about what happened, because we need to understand first and we need to verify these facts. We also need to identify how would my organization respond to the problem. We are not dealing with this alone. We have our own organization, and we might need to talk about this. What kind of response do we want to offer? How far do we want to go in addressing the kind of communication needs also of our target audiences? And very important is to verify the true magnitude of the event as quickly as possible. And so, if I may suggest that people in the treatment hubs also would need to get information from the epidemiology unit or other credible sources so that we know also what is the score at the moment and how people are thinking too. So let's get the facts straight, let's verify it, and identify what your organization's response to the problem is. And usually, the best ways to limit public anxiety, as shown in the poll, some people are anxious in a crisis, is to provide useful information about it. The thing about the COVID-19 situation right now is that it is evolving. What we have said during the first week of March may not be applicable anymore to the kind of situation that we have. And thus, telling people what is actually happening at the moment is something that we can do to limit their anxiety. And because we would have heightened certain anxiety triggers, we also balance it with what the public can do about it. Again, some of which have been already identified by Dr. Gia, especially on the psychosocial aspect part. Now, if you are coming from an organization that would like to take a more active role in showing that you are a credible source of information, then we need to establish that. And we need to communicate how your particular organization is looking at the event, and you have to tell people when more information will be available. Similar to what the DOH is doing, they provide regular updates, and they will tell you also when the next update will be. There's something regular about it, and they tell you the kind of information that will be made available to after a certain time. Now, if your organization would like to take on this role, then we need to understand also the kind of infrastructure that you have within your organization so that you know how the flow will be like, who will do the validating, who will go the actual sharing, and who will do the actual maybe sharing it with the LGU or perhaps in the other forum that you have, if that is possible. Now, just some notes here that messages should demonstrate that your organization is addressing the issues head on, that its approach is reasonable, it's caring, and it's timely. So these are just some guidelines on the kind of information that we would like to come out. We want to make people feel that we are caring and also reasonable in the approach that we take and that we genuinely are. Okay. Now, we also need to understand where people are at the moment. Based on experience and based on also the study of trends, the different risks that are taking place in the crisis, uh, people want the information now. Actually, they want it yesterday, and they want timely, accurate facts, and they will somehow question the magnitude of the crisis or the immediacy of the threat to them. Pagtatanong yan, talaga bang pwede akong maapektuhan? Gaano katagal to? Kung ang enhanced quarantine natin na-extend pa ng 2 weeks, talaga bang hanggang 2 weeks na lang? Or would there be a possibility that the lockdown will be beyond it? And who is going to fix the problem? People are people are thinking about it right now because development is changing. We would always have we would always have updates about it, and because it is novel, then this is something new all the time, and we share it according to the data that we have at the moment. So, what else? Here's the part where we would like to address the outrage factors. That when we communicate with people, especially to those affected, that we acknowledge the event with empathy. We explain them what the risks are. We establish the organizational spokesperson credibility if this is part of your mandate. If this is part of your mandate. So uh, what's important here is, I think, to acknowledge the event with empathy so that we genuinely feel what people are feeling too. We also provide emergency courses of action, including how and where to get more information. So it's important to also provide resources, where to go to, uh, where to call, what hotline numbers do we need to have to get more information about it, and committing to stakeholders and public to continued communication. This is when I would say you would have a network of people too, and to commit that you will be providing information and other important data regularly, giving them update is something that we also need to establish. Because people want information now. In fact, sobrang babad nga nila minsan sa TV, but what we would like is to have verified information and our commitment to continued public communication. Now, the following information are what is often done, especially during the first phases, yung one of the initial exposure to media or perhaps to a group of people. In fact, now we are also strengthening people at the level of the LGU because that's where the action is right now too. And so when officials who are dedicated to provide the information in an emergency, these are the things that we want to see that would somehow respond to how people are feeling. Number one is to express empathy and acknowledge the fear or uncertainty that is happening right now. So, uh, not to go to the technical information first, but address the outrage that is somehow heightened at the moment. Ano munang nararamdaman ng tao? Acknowledge if there are fears, acknowledge if they fear for their own safety, if they feel vulnerable to it, doon muna tayo. And then afterwards, clarify the facts, tell them what is not known at the moment, and it's okay to tell them that we don't know everything at the moment. Just tell them what data you have at the moment, and then What steps will you take to get more facts? When would the next confirmation of results be like? And so that people know, so may inaabangan sila, mas makukuha ko yung update na information after. And then, once that's said, we'd like to give people things to do. So you heighten their interest. What do you want them to do? And these are the usual things on tough manners, on the use of masks, etc. And after giving them things to do, this is where we would go to our referrals. So for additional support, where do you go to? Where do you go for information? Where do you go for actual service? And whom do you call to? So the information provided here would be addressing both the hazard and also the outrage here in risk. It balances the information, and when we do this, we somehow respond to the total things that people are thinking about. Okay. Now, with the initial phase, then you get more and more of the cases, and people are getting anxious already. This is then uh, this is then where we would need to listen to public feedback. This is the time to correct misinformation and to empower decision making, because by this time, a lot have been said already, and there could be a lot of miscommunication too that would be spreading around. So we need to have an ongoing assessment of the event and allocation of resources. We'd like to help people more accurately understand their own risks. I saw in one blog of one person living with HIV that I already have a virus in my body. I don't want another type of virus to be here, and so I want to be informed about it. And how do they feel about that? So this is where this type there would we would anticipate sustain the media interest and scrutiny. In fact, the media group would always be looking for additional information, a different angle, a personalized story, so that they can continue providing the information to us in different forms of media. There can be unexpected developments. This is the time that rumors or misinformation would really place a lot of demands on our media organization. That's why when we have the verified information, it's important that we share them to our media partners too, so that they could also help us in addressing the misinformation. So they will publicly comment on the issue. They will even sometimes contradict or misinterpret the messages that you give. And as I say, expect to be criticized about your handling of the situation. A lot of people will be like armchair workers there, and they will tell you should have done this. You should have asked us to do this earlier on. But then, given the situation, it's the best that we could do at the moment. So expect to be criticized also about your handling of the situation. Just continue doing your work. Now, we need to gain understanding and support for response and recovery plans, because at this time, let's also think about once this is over, how do we get them into recovery as well? And we need to listen to a lot of stakeholder and audience feedback, explain this risk communicate this emergency recommendations, and allow them to make their decisions based on their perception of the risks and benefits, and provide background and encompassing information to those who need it. These are just some of the questions that they come out or that people are thinking at the moment. So if we could provide also some information to address these fears and anxieties so that they would be able to have a better understanding of what the situation is and what they can do about it. But how could this happen? Will I be all right in the long term? Will I recover? Now, given those situations about looking at initial response, the maintenance response, addressing both the hazard and the outrage, I'd like to move on to recommendations coming from WHO in the case of the COVID response, as well as some UNAIDS recommendation for persons living with HIV/AIDS, and this is more technical information. So, this was taken from the interim guidance regarding the risk communication and community engagement readiness to COVID-19. And the WHO suggests that we maintain a two-way communication with our affected audiences to understand how they feel at the moment, what their concerns are, what are their barriers to following the health guidance. Well, some examples that they have identified here were to operate hotlines by medical students, whoever would have the technical information and ready to respond to this could operate hotlines. Also, some call-in radio programs where information is provided and the public can ask questions as well. So the key word here is to maintain the two-way communication with the affected audiences. What else? It's also to monitor those who are affected to ensure that they are following the guidelines and to identify the barriers to engaging in the protective behaviors. And this is really taken from understanding where they are and listening to their feedback so that we know what are the barriers for their engaging in protective behaviors. Now, in addition to getting in touch with those who are affected, it's also engaging with trusted influencers, particularly healthcare workers, to communicate with affected populations, especially to those who are hard to reach. And we need to have like a multiplier effect if we can't reach them at the moment. But these would have to be trusted influencers. What else is having here? Um, Also to establish consistent feedback between communities and the emergency response team and to provide actionable guidance for the responders to better meet the health protection needs of communities. So there are several audiences that we need to engage with, those affected, the influencers, also feedback from the response team so that we are in sync with the kind of response and that we can also give feedback on how they can make better the kind of response they provide to our affected communities and individuals, and see how we can better protect the health of the people under our care too. Now, with regard to the interim guidance on correcting misinformation, there is a lot going on right now, is to establish regular feedback and capture the common questions that are often misunderstood and address this through hotlines and healthcare workers. So we are channels of information, and because we identify also some misinformation, we can help provide this too. What else can we do? We ensure that the results of monitoring, traditional and the social media, are assessed rapidly through the teams set up for this purpose. This is when we're working in organizations and we would like to see and verify the kind of information that is being spread right now so that we know which misinformation we would like to address at the moment. Okay. Now, we also need to engage with the influencers to get people's perception to their feedback. Actually, in risk communication, what is important here is that we understand where our audiences are at the moment. In fact, if this were not a COVID situation, I would have, asked you to go to your intended audiences, talk to them, and identify what really are they feeling right now. But I know you have ways of getting in touch with them and also to be able to uh, prepare the guidance for this people's perception. Whatever their perceptions are, whether they're real or imagined, we need to address them to be able to allay their fears at the moment. Besides, remember, it's hazard plus outrage that we are looking at. Now, uh, UNAIDS recommends the following to be able to continue with what is currently being done here. And so UNAIDS recommends that these services, HIV services, must continue to be made available for people with an at risk of HIV. And it includes ensuring the available things that you often give to your patients: harm reduction, pre-exposure prophylaxis, or steroid needles, etc. But whatever it is that we are currently doing, but to make them available for people with risk of having for HIV. And and I think this is bearing to us the second point here is to prevent people from running out of medicines and the need to access the health system for it, so that we will have multi-month dispensing of 3 months or more for the HIV treatment. I understand from other hubs that they would ask their patients to go to uh, specific centers to get their medicines monthly. But given the situation now, how do we bring their supply of medicines at this time when we are on enhanced community quarantine? How do we have multi-month dispensing or for the HIV treatment? And that there must be access to COVID-19 services for vulnerable people, including a targeted approach to reach those who have been left behind and to help remove financial barriers such as user fees. So if the government or if the group where you are in right now would be able to help in also removing financial barriers so that people could really be accessing the kind of services needed at the moment. So uh, these are the recommendations coming from the international organizations to guidance on risk communication in general, as well as specific ones for the UNAIDS, and also in how do we actually communicate these things to the patients we are working with, and how best we can prepare them given the communication objectives that we have for the moment. And so this would be just basic things that I would like to share about communicating this risk and adhering to the principles of risk communication. So good afternoon to everybody and a good day ahead.
Thank you so much. We have some questions lang po. You talked about, one of your last few slides, you talked about protecting the community. And two of the questions that we have actually cover or point to that. Paano natin ipoprotect yung identity ng mga tao? Kasi in some barangays, actually it's happening also where I live here in Makati, that people are really insisting to disclose their names aside from where they live. And siguro yung second layer dyan ay, how do we protect our healthcare workers? They are being attacked.
Let me see if I understand the question.
Sure.
Okay. One is that we have a concern about the privacy of the
Yes.
data, particularly the identity of the patients whom we are handling. And then the next layer is that because the health workers would not like to share the information, that they are being attacked for it. So, and we would like to have some guidance on how we would be able to communicate this without really disclosing the location of our target groups. Okay. So, are we saying that the persons living with HIV uh, are already having symptoms of COVID-19 too? And that's why the need to give this information to the LGU, for example?
I think specifically for this one, in this locality, whenever they post in social media the age, gender, and barangay of COVID positive patient, people clamor for their identity. So I guess yan yung mga kung ano yung pangalan niya.
Okay. Well, I think as a general rule, we do not give the patient name. And in fact, they're just known as codes because we don't need to get the names. We only need to get the numbers, the status. And so we stick with that because that's also how the DOH is doing. They're not, unless, of course, there is a public announcement coming from the person himself or herself. But this information is not disclosed, only only uh, specific information.
I think as healthcare workers, we understand that because it's part of our practice.
Mhm.
But a lot of people don't understand that, especially on social media, para siyang wildfire, tapos magka-clamor yung mga tao. Do you have any practical tips on how to support healthcare workers who actually also manage their social media account or any line of communication? Paano natin papakalmahin yung mga nagka-clamor?
Okay. We are responding now to the outrage of people, their need for information, their clamor, because that much they don't know. What we often say is provide them the information on how they could protect themselves. Rather than focus on getting information about other people, they need to be concerned on how they will be able to protect themselves. And tell them also what is the current system in place that the government or your organization is doing to really address the problem so that they just take care of themselves, they just do the home quarantine, let the people in charge of it take care of it. But we have to tell them what is the current system in place. Yun siguro yung kailangang malaman na this is the current system in place. We are not telling you that it is 100% foolproof, but this is the current system. This is what we are doing to address the efforts and take care of yourselves.
Okay, thank you. One of the question, I think you already answered it. How much is too much information? I think one of your slides already covered this. You gave specific steps like clarification of facts, what is not known, steps taken to get more facts, call to action, giving people things to do, and then referral. So, Prof. Beng, I hope you can stay. We still have other questions, but we also would like to go through some questions for Doc Gia and Doc RJ. So, Rad, can you go to the slide with Q&A para mabasa natin lahat?
Okay.
Doc Gia, baka pwede ka na rin mag-unmute.
Yes, I did.
Yay! Thank you.
Hi, Prof. Beng.
Hi, Gia.
This one?
Sige, let's see ha. Nasagot na to. Meron ka bang, oh, eto, what can I do to practically protect myself or housemates from domestic violence? And I think merong karugtong na question dito that's probably more appropriate for Prof. Beng. Yung kung meron bang, kasi puro online consultations ngayon, are there keywords na now we can probably, are there ways for healthcare practitioners to actually train your patients on how they can communicate with you, like giving you signals, especially if they are going through domestic violence? So maybe for the first question, what can I do to practically protect myself or housemates from domestic violence? Anyone can answer. From Doc Gia or Prof. Beng.
I actually tweeted, I'll retweet it na lang siguro because they gave out numbers because we cannot also disregard those who are abused, no? Because unfortunately, they take this time to be abusive, no? Wait. If RJ is still online, I think there's a Facebook group na. Sige, Prof. Beng, you muna.
Yung siguro keywords, yung signal, ano ba, blink once, blink twice, ganyan.
Actually, when we were discussing this on how we can address these concerns, we would like these people to articulate how they actually feel. And to allow them to articulate this, the other end of the line, the healthcare workers, would also need to be sensitive in the kind of words that we use to allow them to talk about it. I think it is more really for the mental health to mirror how they're feeling at the moment, and also rephrasing their thoughts. And it's really understanding them muna from, that's for the mental health part. I'm not sure about the domestic violence thing because we often catch that when we have face-to-face.
Yes.
When we have face-to-face, and then after several minutes of interview, and then eventually you get to the point na, kaya pala, ito yung presenting symptom niya. Pagdating dito, may domestic violence pala. Pero hindi niya yun sasabihin at the start. But it's really being patient and trying to gather more information. What I would miss here would be the nonverbal cues, because we get a lot of information from nonverbal cues. Kaya if we can see them also, kahit na konti, so we get a sense of what they're feeling, because most of the time they don't actually say this.
Yes, I agree. No? And there are also efforts in social media to address domestic violence. So you might want to access the sites of Lunas Collective, that's LUNAS, and the Sanctuary Project on Facebook. So those are two movements that they have offered their service in terms of reporting domestic violence. And this encompasses lahat, no, gender, women, LGBTQ, and those at high risk.
Thank you. Doc RJ will show us some numbers later after the Q&A. Rad, next slide. Meron pa ba tayong, I think meron pa tayong questions. Rad, are you there? Ayan. Most of these were discussed earlier. Eto, since we can't normally grieve deaths, what can we do to cope, especially when experiencing shock, anger, frustration, heartbreak, hopelessness, and helplessness?
Personally, kasi you really have to talk about it sometimes, no, when you're ready, and then find ways also how you can let your grief out. Like you can write or draw or something. Parang there are may mga different ways, and find your own way in terms of Prof. Beng.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think it's really expressing yourselves during this situation. For people who would like to write down their feelings, they can even have they can write about it, or even just talk to people. But one thing I also maybe ask people to do is give yourself time to grieve. Kasi minsan parang para mawala na lang sa isip, you get yourself too busy doing other things. Pero ang tanong, naproseso mo ba yung sarili mo muna? And that's why I also tell people, kung kailangan kang mag-grieve, give yourself time. Allow yourself to do that. Kung naiiyak ka, umiyak ka. If you feel anger, just express it. Pero kailangan mo yan. But I also tell them, huwag naman masyadong matagal. Malaman masyadong matagal. And that's why, writing about it, talking to other people could somehow help you also in the grieving process. But yes, it's difficult right now because we don't physically see what's happening. Yun lang. Hindi natin parang matapos, ay, may seremonya, ay, nakikita ko na sinasara na yung kabaong, etc. There's nothing of that sort right now because of the current situation.
Doc RJ, do you have any suggestions on how we can go through grief? Kasi yung iba hindi nga nila nakikita na or wala nang wake yung iba.
Yung sa akin, ma'am, I agree with Doc Gia, no? So maraming ways to express, and kung kailangan ng additional support from another person, then we can also utilize online means. So yan naman yung platforms natin, like for example Zoom na pwedeng gamitin. And I think meron ring mga ngayon, mga funeral parlors na nag-offer ng parang online na lamay. So I don't know if it's helpful for everyone, pero it's also one way to physically connect people kahit na hindi tayo makapagsama-sama ng physically.
Okay. Thank you. I think this is the last two questions for mental health, no? How can we prevent suicide kaya during these times?
It's important to recognize possible subtle signs of suicide. No, one of which is they start to express it in the. Di ba, RJ, pag nag-lecture tayo sa suicide, we always tell them not to take jokes for granted because some of them will just express it, but take it seriously. And some will isolate. Bigla na lang mag-isolate yan. And they are very risky in terms of life-risking behaviors, if I may term it that way. So during that time, it's very important that you focus your efforts on them and try to make them talk about how they feel and make them also feel na hindi that they're there not to judge but to listen. And I think that's one way that we can address this because it's already happening. It's a reality. So that's my take.
Siguro just to add na lang, Red, I think it's also helpful that we map out kung sino yung mga vulnerable groups. Like for example, ngayon, may physical distancing tayo. Yung ilan sa mga kasama natin ay mag-isa sa bahay nila, for example. Or for sa mga frontliners, hindi sila nakaka-uwi to their families. So, it's very important to direct the help dun sa mga alam na natin na kailangan ng support. Like for example, yung mga may diagnosable mental health conditions even before. Second is, I think it's also important, since nagiging outlet natin ngayon is mainly through social media, it's very important na ma-monitor natin yung trends ng mga pinopost ng person na yon. So if meron ng mga sa tingin natin na possibly harmful na thoughts or feelings na na-express doon, then we might need to actively reach out already. And I think at the end of the day, it's always a community effort. So I think we need to map out kung sino yung mga tao na pwede nating katulong in terms of providing support to that person. Kasi right now, 'di ba, baka hindi tayo available, may mga times na ganun eh. So baka kailangan natin mag-identify ng network of care that can actually contribute in addressing the needs of the client. Same goes sa mga PLHIV. So baka pwede rin nating matap yung mga different PLHIV organizations. I've worked with some of them. Yung ilan sa kanila, meron silang active group chats. So baka kailangan rin natin mag-send out ng mga messages. And siguro, dito rin pumapasok yung balancing of the information that we get. Kasi right now, very negative yung halos na nasa social media. So baka we need to balance it out with positive stories. How do people actually cope with this kind of illness? So mga ganun. Kasi sometimes pwede tayong magsabi ng maraming mga information, mga tips on how to overcome these challenges. Pero iba yung interventions that might work for their specific sector at sila yung makaka-identify nun.
Okay, thank you. One last, how can we deal with family members na matigas ang ulo? How can we deal with irritation? Yung talagang gustong lumabas ng bahay, hindi mapigilan.
Si Prof. Peng siguro.
Meron talagang ganyan. Meron talagang matigas ang ulo. Ngayon, ang tanong lang natin dito, anong dahilan? At bakit nila gustong lumabas? Kasi if we ask them na, ano bang gusto mo na gawin sa labas? And then, kung alam natin yung reason kung bakit niya gustong lumabas, and then, meron bang parang activity na pwedeng alternative na pwede niyang gawin para hindi na siya lumabas. Kasi kaya niya gustong gawin yan, hindi naman pwede nating stop doing it. But we need to offer an alternative na viable for that person. Or yung iba naman, nadadala sa pakiusap. Na for some people, if you tell, hindi na lang para sa'yo para sa mga kasama mo dito, para sa mga batang kasama mo, na kapag lumabas ka at may makuha ka doon, hindi lang ikaw ang mahihirapan. Pati ang mga bata at mga matatanda na kasama mo dito. So, depending on the kind of mindset that person has, so this might work for them. Kaya, kung matigas ang ulo, alamin kung bakit niya gustong lumabas, and maybe for an emotional appeal, you ask them that it is also meant for the people whom they love inside the household. They might reconsider their position.
Okay, thank you. I have one question here na how can we manage people living with HIV who has layers of problems during this ECQ? May PLHIV doing psychosocial therapy on a regular basis, drug use. Digital intervention is not doing him any good. He lives alone. Hindi niya kaya ang Zoom lang for consultation. Gusto niya ng counselor in person. At kailangan niya ng person-to-person contact. What is the best thing we can do? Baka si Doc RJ may suggestion sa atin.
I think meron pa rin pong mga certain services na nag-provide ng counseling. Of course, kung hindi talaga nagwo-work sa kanya yung ganong intervention, then hindi po natin ipipilit sa kanya yun. So, I think kailangan lang po natin mag-map out ng mga professionals who are still continuing to do clinics despite yung gantong situation natin. Kasi parang, I think naman, hindi naman pwede na i-stop yung mga other health services just because na merong pandemic tayong kinakaharap right now. So, siguro kailangan lang po mag-map out, and it's very difficult sometimes kasi lalo na kung nasa province sila. So, baka kailangan po mag-get in touch with the local mental health professionals and organizations that are working within your locality.
Okay, thank you. Rad, can we go to the next slide? I think some of the questions are for Prof. Beng. Ayan. Yung iba dito nasagot na pero ito atang first. How can we as health professionals educate the general public to follow DOH protocols due to apparent distrust after Duque's actions? Oh.
Heavy. Okay. So, um, first of all, what is the source of the distrust? Is it because the pronouncements have been changing? And nangyayari yon. Kung ano yung nasabi nila na guidelines during the first week of March, iba na rin yung guidelines para dito. I think what we can tell the people is that at the moment, this is what is being recommended based on the data that we have. And these guidelines might change when more data is provided us, and maybe the results of studies would have already come at the moment. So my point is to tell them that the situation is evolving and that we may not have the answers all at the same time, and that we appeal to them to tell them that allow us to provide more information depending on how it would really evolve. Na if the source of the distrust is that of the changing guidelines, and we have to accept na talagang nagbabago ang guidelines. Okay. That's one way of telling it. Give the information the verified information that you have at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Teka lang, let's just... Okay, I think we've completed the Q&A kasi yung iba dito nasagot na eh. Rad, meron pa ba tayong ibang slide or ito na yung last? For the Q&A.
This one.
Yeah, okay. Sige. We'll just do a summary and then meron na tayong photo op, so please stay. And then the last one would be Doc RJ will share his screen later on because he has some contact information to share with us. So very quickly, yung summary natin ay ang pinaka-takeaway would be feelings vary. Feelings vary. Parang siguro yung guidelines nagbabago. Ang mga feelings natin ay nagba-vary. So 3 L's to remember: look, listen, and link. And I think that it's very obvious from our question and answer that the link part is very important. And so Doc RJ will be able to share some more contact information with us. Yung sa communication strategies naman natin, it's important to remember that when we speak of risk, it does not only involve yung acquiring COVID, but also remembering that even our emotions like outrage can also be part of our risks. And that's why Doc Gia earlier was able to discuss on how we can practically address anxiety and other emotions that could change. Okay, one of the key points to remember when it comes to information, especially that, if we're only getting our information on social media, would be how are we going to receive them na, kumbaga, bite size. So she gave us some steps that I will repeat. Clarification of facts. What is not known, it's important to acknowledge. Ano yung hindi natin alam? Steps taken to get more facts. And then call to action, giving us what to do. For example, avoid sharing fake news and also learning where we get our information. And then referrals. So we go back to linking or referrals. Okay. Meron ba tayong parting message from the 3 resource persons? Bago ang picture taking.
Basta for me, we're all in this together. No one is left behind. I know it's difficult. Lahat naman tayo na tatamaan in this whole pandemic, but we're all just let's just look forward in recovering and focus our efforts, and everyone is doing naman his or her part. And we're here anytime that you need anyone to talk to.
Doc RJ, do you have any parting message, especially dahil meron tayong parang tinatawag na new normal and with this uncertainty?
Yeah, of course, nandyan pa rin po yung challenge na pag-adapt dun sa new normal. And I think hindi lahat tayo at the same level in terms of having the capacity to adapt to it. So, kailangan nating i-map out siguro sino yung mga vulnerable groups and populations that we need to actually actively reach out. And siguro, i-highlight ko na lang rin yung importance of social solidarity, especially in this time na very limited yung resources, maraming uncertainties and threats that are happening. So, siguro it's time also for us to also regulate kung ano yung mga things that we are used to before, and then share the resources na meron po tayo. Kasi kung merong mga threats that are happening in one person, then hindi malayo sa atin yon kung titignan natin yung whole scheme of things, kung tawagin.
Thank you. Prof. Beng, do you have any parting message to our classmates?
Well, what I'd like to emphasize is at this time to really listen to the feedback coming from the people so that we get to understand how they truly feel at the moment and make appropriate messages for them. And not only that, but to coordinate or collaborate with groups who will be able to help us respond to this.
Thank you. You can screenshot from your computer, especially if you already need the numbers today.
And po, so this is for frontline workers. So yan po yung UP Diliman Psychosocial Services or PsychServe. In Touch Community Services also has a contact number. Aside from the NCMH po ito, this is a private company. And for those in Visayas, you can also reach out to the University of San Carlos. And then ito po yung mga numbers that are collected by the Sanctuary Project. So naka-classify siya kung saan kayo pwedeng humingi ng assistance for gender-based violence. So ayan, yung sa different government agencies, local government units, and non-government organizations. So for those outside of NCR, I think ito yung pwedeng mas tawagan. And Luna's Collective also has psychosocial support for those who are undergoing gender-based violence and legal assistance also.
Okay, hihingi na lang kami ng copy ng last few slides para lang ma-post namin sa aming private Facebook group and ma-capture namin ng yung numbers. Thank you so much.